Today we're going to talk about how skipped maintenance and improper maintenance can cost you tons, if not thousands of dollars. Let's get started. As you guys can see, this is a really nice Lexus LS400. We know you guys love these. We're going to come back to this one in a minute, but first let's go talk about an Acura that's actually in the shop. This one's actually one that Danielson is working on. It's a 1999 Acura TL with the 3.2 V6 in it. The customer came in because it's time for a timing belt and water pump, but unbeknownst to them, which I don't really fault them, this is kind of a common misconception. There's a certain amount of miles when it comes to scheduled maintenance for timing belts. Also, there's a certain amount of months. Kind of like when you have a warranty on your car, you buy a brand new car, it's 36,000 miles or 36 months, whichever one comes first. It's the same thing on a timing belt. 90,000 miles or 3 years or 5 years, whichever comes first. Then it's time to do a water pump and a timing belt. There's a common misconception, 10 years have passed, but I've only put 3,000 miles on it. So it's not time for a timing belt yet. Yes, it is. This one, like I said, has come in because the miles have come up. It's time for timing belt, water pump. We got it halfway apart and Danielson started noticing some things. He was like, what is going on here? Let me show you guys. So as Danielson was pulling off the timing covers, he kept seeing hair. He was like, did a cat or a mouse or something get stuck in the timing belt? He was kind of confused. Let me show you guys what we're talking about. So right here at the bottom of the timing cover is a lot of sludge, but also accumulated fibers. It looks like hair. It's all in the bottom of here. Here's the upper timing covers, and you can see a layer on the inside. It's like little fibers or hairs. It looks like maybe, like here's some here I can pinch, there's some fibers there. Almost like an animal got in here and got chewed up in the timing belt. Of course, we know that's not possible. If it were to happen that way, it would literally throw the belt off. I don't think a mouse or a cat or anything can get wrapped up in the belt and not throw the belt off. It would be catastrophic to the engine, also to the animal. The animal would probably not survive that. Also, there would be more than just hair. There would probably be debris or blood or who knows what else would be in there. I got to looking at the timing belt service from the last time. Let's take a look at it. We can see that the miles are kind of rubbed off. This is why I always put a piece of clear packing tape across the top to keep this from happening and rubbing off. Something 67,000, I'm not sure what that says, but one thing that I noticed, it was back in 2011, 13 years ago. The customer's done a good job maintaining this car. As you've seen all over that upper engine cover, there's all kinds of maintenance that's been documented with little paint pens or whatever, showing that things have been maintained over time. So I applaud the customer for that. But 13 years on a timing belt, it can still break. Even though the miles haven't accumulated, rubber ages whether or not it's used. One thing that we noticed is it could have been catastrophic on this engine. Let's go take a look. One thing that Danielson noticed on the timing belt itself, there's a groove being worn into the belt. Right here on the leading edge, something's been slicing it. And inside of these timing belts is nylon cords or some kind of a material. There are cords inside. That is the hairs that we're seeing. It's actually slicing into the belt. On the other cam, we can see that the belt is actually pooched out, sticking out past the belt. Look at this gap over here, guys. It's a big gap here, but not on the other cam. There's hardly any gap there. This is correct, it's centered. So I found where the hair is coming from. It's because the timing belt, which has fibers infused in the rubber, is literally shedding its hair out because it's being cut deeply on the edges. What would cause that? Well, I did some checking and I showed Danielson exactly what would cause that. This tensioner pulley here, if we get a screwdriver underneath of it, I can't really show you, it's kind of hard. but it rocks back and forth just a little bit. If it were to go any more, this would not be a straight surface, would be at an angle on the pulley. This belt could walk itself off of this pulley. Luckily the covers and some of the brackets and things have kept the belt from coming off. I don't know if it would have come off or not, but there's some bearings and things. Age has accumulated, even though the miles may not have accumulated. It still started to fail. Luckily, it didn't completely fail. We caught it just in time. I'm glad the customer brought it in for some maintenance to get the timing belt done. It's perfect timing. This is really a good thing because we can get this taken care of and then they won't have a destroyed engine. So that's where we're at on this Acura. Now we're going to move over to Hoovie's Maserati Ghibli.
Whoa, Wizard, I think his Maserati exploded.
Yes, this engine is actually bad. Hoovie actually has an engine on order. We're going to take care of this and all the pieces and parts. As you've seen on his video, he showed how it's all been removed from the car. Danielson is actually doing this work. So what I'm getting at here is not the fact that it overheated, but the fact that the previous owner, when it lost coolant, they just threw in whatever green coolant they could fit in there, which was a bad idea because it probably made this problem even worse. We all know that if you mix the improper coolants, what happens? Remember Dexcool, which GM used, and you mix green coolant with that, what happens? It turns into a brown jelly, like a death jelly. It's really bad. I've got some evidence to show you where it has leaked out on here and also inside the engine block. Let's take a look.
Dear, it looks like the whole entire front suspension's on that table.
It is. This is the whole front cradle is what it's called. The engine, transmission, everything just kind of sits on this and you pull it all out the bottom as one unit. But one thing I noticed, it was leaking coolant all out the side of the engine and it had actually gelled. Oh, guys. It's like green lime jello. Oh, gross. And on the side of the engine block, when Danielson removed the cylinder head, some of the coolant came out and it was also green lime jello. Look at that, guys. It's like grease almost. Gross. Like I always say, just wait, there's more. You say, well, that ain't too bad. It didn't hurt anything in the engine. Actually, it did. We can see around, this is the cooling jacket that goes around the cylinders and where it got the hottest because of it overheating. It actually turned the gel or the jelly into these chunks. It's like solidified silicone or something. It's just, look at that, guys. It just breaks off. It's all in here. Look at it down here. So how did this happen? I can tell you exactly how it happened. Someone cheaped out on antifreeze. They knew their engine was cooked, they didn't care, and they're like, I'll just go to my parts store, my local guy, and just get the green cheap stuff. I don't even care right now because my engine's shelled out. Boop, 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 boop. They dumped it in. And the remaining coolant that was in there, that was actual Maserati antifreeze, mixed with the green stuff, and we see the damage that was done. So based on that alone, I definitely do not want to reuse this engine. Also, it overheated so bad. The cylinders here stand alone separate from one another. They're not a solid piece. And we actually got some straight edges over this. This is all warped in here. It won't seal. It'll never seal again properly. You can't really just reskim it on a machine because the bores are warped. They overheated the living hell out of this engine. Really, really bad. So Hoovie got the engine this way. This was a nice, pleasant gift for him. Obviously, it wasn't pleasant. He was like, okay, I knew it had maybe some issues, but this is a lot worse than what I was led on to believe. Unfortunately, this engine is cooked. They filled the entire cooling system with jelly. They turned it into jelly. They overheated it so bad that each of the cylinder spacings are warped. This thing's a goner. This is salvage yard. This is going to the junkyard. Maybe Mrs. Wizard can use it for her part works.
Ooh, I could do some pretty cool stuff with this.
That's about all this engine's good for anymore. It's toast. So be careful what kind of coolant or fluids. Make sure you're putting the approved fluids in your vehicle. You can't just go buy the cheap stuff. Say, I really don't want to spend the money right now. As you can see, did it save them any money? No, it actually cost them some money, a lot of money. Also, someone said, why don't you just put new liners in? Why don't you just blah, 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 rebuild it? It would probably cost twice as much than to have just put a good used engine in it. I don't even think a machine shop would tackle that or touch it. So here is where it's not deferred maintenance or skipped maintenance. This is negligent maintenance. Poor choices were made, just like Jared from the Questionable Garage says, questionable choices have questionable results. There you go. Now let's get to the LS400, you guys' favorite. So this is a 95 Lexus LS400, and I know you guys are thinking, these things are tanks. They don't ever break. There's no car on earth that never breaks. Any mechanic that says, I can keep my car running and it has never broken or it'll never break, that's a lie. This one has quite a bit of maintenance. It's been maintained. They've done a good job. By the way, this customer just bought this from someone who claimed a lot of repairs were done. And they have done a pretty good job. Let me read you some of the email here. It says, the previous owner told me to change the oil every 3,000 miles. He told me it had changed spark plugs, serpentine belt, timing belt, water pump, battery starter, alternator brakes. I just like to make sure they actually did all those things, just as they said that they did. Also check the car over. So from the listing and based on some of the claims, you would say, well, this thing's probably serviced. It probably needs nothing. This thing is perfect. No, it's not. Let me go get Grimes. He actually checked this thing over. This thing needs over $3,000 worth of work. So you check this thing over. We found over almost $4,000 worth of work. Does that sound something like that would probably be surprising on one of these?
Well, I mean, for the mileage and the year, I mean, it is a 95. And most of the stuff that we quoted was original parts. Mm-hmm. So, you know, 20 plus years of service, and you're going to have some leaks and bushings and all of that. And it's just deferred maintenance that new owner is going to be responsible to catch up on.
So some of the things they mentioned in the email, they talk about the alternator, the radiator, all those things have been replaced. Mm-hmm. It did look like they had done those things, didn't it?
Yep.
So those things have been done, but we found so much more. And again, this is nothing against the previous owner. They're just things that accumulate with age. One thing I found is the parts on these are really high.
That's the Lexus tax.
Yeah.
Don't ever look at interior parts.
So whatever you think it should be, add 3 times to that. That's typically what an LS400 is. And you were mentioning there's really no in between. There's like really cheap crap parts or OEM.
Yep.
That's it. Do you want the cheap crap on your LS400? No? Okay, well then you're going to pay for the OEM, which is 3 times as much. Let's go ahead and open the hood and show some of the things you found.
Somebody's done hood struts at least, so that's nice.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Looks like they put a recent battery in and they put some anti-corrosion coating on it. One thing you mentioned is the valve cover gaskets are leaking.
Yeah, you can see some residue around it, and when I was underneath of it, you can see it leaking down the cylinder head a little bit.
Okay.
It's not terrible.
Yeah.
But you know, they are leaking. They've probably been done some point.
Mm-hmm. These still take 3 to 4 hours to do. There's a lot of things to come off. It's not that fun, is it?
No. And dealing with the millions of little vacuum lines and connectors that are inevitably going to break and.
So the air filter, you actually took it out and showed it to me. It was pretty chock full of dust and dirt, and so it needs to be changed. So the rest of the things you have listed here are things really need to get it up in the air. So let's get this thing lifted. So one of the things you listed was the power steering lines are leaking. Pretty much all of them are leaking.
Yeah, so the high pressure line from the pump, and then also the pump to the reservoir, and because there's so much oil, it's hard to tell if the other one, the return line from the rack is leaking, but at this point, you know, if a couple of them are leaking, the rest aren't far behind.
Yeah, we can actually see right here, that one's literally actively dripping oil off of it. So that one is definitely one that's going to get replaced. Really, we quoted all of them. The next thing you listed was the lower oil pan is leaking. Yeah, I definitely can see that around here. This isn't the main oil pan, the upper oil pan. It's just a little sheet metal one on the bottom. You can see this little bit of seepage going on all around the entire oil pan.
Yeah, and those lower oil pans, Toyota just uses an RTV-like sealant for those, and over time it just gets dry and brittle and starts to leak.
And then trans service, it needs to be done. It's time for that. And a transmission mount is torn.
Yeah.
Let's go take a look at that.
Oh yeah, there you go. And you can see it's torn right up top here. It's about torn all the way through that, and the mount itself is sitting right on the transmission cross member.
That one's, fully collapsed. You said the engine mounts look good, but this one definitely does not.
Yeah, engine mounts look to have been done at some point. So they're in good shape. The engine's sitting above the cross member like it should be. Up front there was also the torque arm bushings, even though I've got that under tray up there.
Yeah.
That kind of, but
can't really see them, but yeah.
But looking at them, they're they've just twisted and kind of shredded. They're just dry rotted.
The rest of the car really looks like it's been taken pretty good care of, though.
Yeah, it's not rusty underneath. There's not, other than the lower oil pan and the power steering leaks, nothing super crazy. Somebody, they took pretty decent care of this, took care of, what it needed, but there's a lot of just original parts on here that are, at the end or past the end of their service life, so.
Well, let's get this thing back on the ground then. So the things that have been replaced are things that you would commonly think of.
Yep.
But the things that need to be replaced, you don't really ever think, maybe every so many miles I should change my power steering hoses. They kind of just, as they leak, you replace them, but otherwise you leave them alone.
Yeah, I suspect that's probably the gist of the maintenance on this, is just as parts actually fail, once there's the warning period is up, and it's like, oh, well, your radiator is leaking heavily now, or your alternator has completely failed, the battery's failed, something like that. Then they get it in, replace it, and don't really think preventatively or ahead.
Right.
And, a lot of those components are not really something that, you have a lot of forewarning about.
Right. This thing has about 150,000 miles on it roughly, and if this was your car, would it be worth the $3,000 to get it all completely sorted? I think it would, because it would still be cheaper than buying a brand new car.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, how many of these do we see in, the 300,000 mile range?
Totally.
So, go with the OEM stuff, go with the higher, higher quality parts. And just take care of it. This thing will be great.
That was definitely one thing. When I was looking up the parts, I was looking up power steering hoses, the OEM ones. I was thinking in my mind, $35, $40. No, $175 or $220 per hose line. The power steering reservoir, which kind of looked it up real quick to see in case it needed to be replaced, just the reservoir is almost $300. Just the little metal reservoir. Maybe you can find a cheap aftermarket one. I wouldn't want to put that on this car. I would put, like he just mentioned, go with OEM, because it can last a long time. These cars can go a very long time. They have a long life. So yes, it's totally worth it, but we'll get the quote to the customer and see what they want to do, and we'll go from there. Thanks for your commentary. Definitely got quite a list of things to get done on this. Even though it's been maintained well, it still has some maintenance that needs to be done to it to get it completely sorted. So if you're curious what kind of tools we use, or he uses, or other people use in the shop, check our Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut if you purchase anything. We really appreciate it. Check out Mrs. Wizard's Ways. We just hit, if you guys don't know already, 1 million subscribers. She's got a video for you guys to watch over there. It's a really cool video. And hit the subscribe button here, because there's more Grimes action to come, and many other videos, cars, things scheduled. Clear for a month. Thanks for watching.
the window tint, like because these are tinted, but the factory tint, it depends on the color of the exterior and the interior. So if you get one that's like that seafoam green with like the blue or the gray interior, the window tint will actually be like a greenish blue color.
Oh, cool.
And then on these with the tan interior, they're like a gold color.